Air traffic in Korea's territorial airspace jumped 45% in 2023 from the previous year, approaching near pre-pandemic levels, according to the Transport Ministry.
지난해 우리나라 항공 교통량이 전년 대비 45% 증가해 코로나 팬데믹 이전 수준에 근접한 것으로 나타났다고 국토교통부가 발표했습니다. So air travel is back up to speed?
That's right.
Yeah.
I guess, people are revenge traveling after we've been kind of pent up inside during the COVID pandemic. People weren't able to travel abroad, but now people are traveling more. So the number of airplanes that flew over the Korean airspace, it reached 780,635 last year. That was up from a little over 530,000 a year ago. And this is the annual figure includes airplanes that used airports in Korea and also the planes that just flew over the Korean airspace for their destinations in other countries as well. And last year's air traffic, although it has increased, they say that it has yet to recover to pre-pandemic levels back in 2019. That was when the corresponding figure was at about 840,000. So we still have a little bit more to go until the figures reach, I guess, the normal levels of when people used to travel a lot. But given the rapid pace of recovery since August last year, they are expecting, the air traffic amount to recover to those levels back in 2019 or even exceed it very soon.
Yeah, I think we can feel it in our everyday lives as well because we are also planning travel more now than we have been doing in the past 2-3 years. 그러니까 이제 코로나19 종식이 딱 되자마자 사람들이 조금씩 그동안 억눌렸던 여행하고 싶은 이 마음들이 꿈틀꿈틀하면서 여행을 이제 거의 보복하다시피 보복 여행이라는 말이 있잖아요. 영어로는 revenge traveling, 우리말로 이제 보복 여행을 한다라고 하는데 그런 억눌렸던 감정을 영어로는 pent up 무슨 anger가 될 수도 있고 여기서는 demand겠죠.
Right.
네, pent up 우리말로 이렇게 기사에 보면은 펜트업 현상 이런 말도 쓰더라고요. 근데 이제 pent up이라는 것 자체는 억눌려 있다라는 뜻인데
It's been pressed down.
That's right.
Yeah.
그래서 그런 pent-up demand, 여행에 대한 여러 가지 수요가 이렇게 억눌렸었다가 그게 now it's being unleashed. 이제 그게 폭발하는 거죠. 특히 작년 하반기부터는요. 2019년 수준을 이미 조금 넘어섰다고 하니까 이제는 돌아왔네요. 한국에 대한 수요가.
Back to normal.
That's right. Yeah, people are definitely traveling more. I guess that's the same for domestic travel, international travel, you name it. All right, let's have a look at the main expressions. Territorial airspace.
Right. So territorial airspace, it refers to the portion of the atmosphere or up in the sky, the air that's controlled by a country above its territory.
여기서 말하는 territorial airspace는요, 그 한 나라의 주권이 미치는 그 하늘의 범위인데 한마디로 영공이 되겠죠. 자, 그다음에 to approach라는 동사는요.
Right. So that means to come near or near something or someone, and it could be in space or it could be in time or quality or even amount.
approach something은 다가가다라는 뜻이 있습니다. 그래서 점점 이 수치가 2019년 레벨에 근접하고 있다. 2023년 전체로 봤을 때는요. 아직 2019년 레벨이 아니지만 작년 하반기부터는 이미 넘어섰으니까 이제 올해는 뭐 연간 수치가 이렇게 넘을 것으로 그렇게 또 예상이 됩니다. approach, 다가가다. 자, 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. Air traffic in Korea's territorial airspace jumped 45% in 2023 from the previous year, approaching near pre-pandemic levels, according to the Transport Ministry. Now let's move on to Germany for our second headline.
Hundreds of thousands of people have taken to the streets across Germany in protest against the far-right Alternative for Germany party after it emerged that the party's members discussed plans to deport migrants en masse.
독일 구구정당 독일을 위한 대안의 당원들이 대규모 이민자 추방을 논의했다는 사실이 알려지자 독일 전역에서 수십만 명의 시위자들이 거리로 쏟아져 나와 이에 항의하는 시위를 펼쳤습니다. Okay, so police say the number was around 100,000, but organizers say it was closer to 300,000.
Yeah.
All right, tell us more.
Right. So these were pro-democracy marches and protests that were held in cities across Germany, and they were spurred by far-right or the far-right party's plans to deport millions of migrants and minorities. That they came up with this sort of plan during a secret meeting. So as you mentioned, the numbers are a bit different according to different sources,
Sure.
but they're saying that about 300,000 people, they bundled up against freezing weather for protests in various cities, including Hamburg, Frankfurt, Hanover, Nuremberg, and other German cities, with some placards playing on the Alternative for Germany Party's name, saying that fascism isn't an alternative. And so, as I mentioned, it's been sparked by a report from a news outlet that detailed how the party's members met with far-right extremists back in November on what they call remigration, which is a euphemism for the expulsion of migrants and minorities, including those who are naturalized German citizens. And this news has, of course, it's shocked many Germans at a time when this party has been riding high in opinion polls before three major regional elections that are to be held in eastern Germany. And apparently they've come out and talked a little bit about what's going on, and they say that remigration is part of the party's manifesto, but their policy, it apparently does not involve naturalized German citizens. So they maybe are thinking about, expose or take or, pushing away these migrants who are in Germany.
민주주의를 지키자라고 하면서 지금 굉장히 많은 시위자들이 거리에 나선 모습이고요. 경찰 추산 한 10만 명, 그리고 이제 주최 측에서는 거의 30만 명에 가깝다 이렇게 얘기를 하고 있습니다. 수치의 차이는 좀 있습니다만 어쨌든 내용인즉슨 이렇게 이민자 추방을 하려고 하는 극우 정당에 반대하는 시위인 거죠. 자, 표현을 한번 보도록 하겠습니다. People took to the streets.
Right. So if you take to the streets, it really means to come out to the streets, and it means to protest or to rally. And these people are not just coming out to the streets. It means they're expressing their opposition or their opinion to something that they are opposed to. Often it could be in a violent way.
Exactly. 말 그대로 하면은 take to the streets는 이제 거리로 나오다이지만요. 그 이상의 의미를 가지고 있어서 가두 시위를 하다, 거리에 나와서 프로테스팅을 한 것까지 의미를 내포하고 있습니다. 그 다음에는 this is in protest against a policy to deport migrants en masse.
Right. So en masse means in a group or all together.
그래요. 자, en masse는 프렌치에서 온 표현인 것 같아요. 그래서 ENMASSE 이렇게 쓰는데요. 대규모 집단으로라는 뜻이 있습니다. 그래서 대규모 이민자 추방을 이제 논의했다라는 얘기가 나오자 사람들이 이렇게 거리로 나와 시위를 펼치고 있는 모습입니다. 다시 한번 이 독일 소식 읽어보겠습니다. Hundreds of thousands of people have taken to the streets across Germany in protest against the far-right Alternative for Germany party, after it emerged that the party's members discussed plans to deport migrants en masse.
A parcel delivery firm in Britain has disabled the artificial intelligence function in its online chat systems after a frustrated user coaxed the chatbot into composing a poem about how bad the company's customer service was.
네, 영국의 한 택배회사가 인공지능 기반의 온라인 고객 상담 채팅 서비스를 중단했습니다. 이는 서비스에 불만족한 어느 고객이 챗봇을 상대로 상담 기능이 얼마나 형편없는지에 대한 시를 쓰도록 유도하는 해프닝이 있은 후 나온 조치입니다. This is the problem with AI.
Yeah.
It's really smart and it will do anything you ask it to do, even if you ask it to write a poem about how bad your company is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That's
So-
what happened, right?
So it's smart, but it's really stupid at the same time,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So what happened was this customer, his name is Ashley Beauchamp, and he basically was so frustrated because all he really wanted to do was find out where his stuff was.
Okay.
Because he's been waiting for his parcel to arrive. He said that even after all this, it still hadn't arrived yet. So the frustrated user, he tried to coax the system into writing a poem about how bad the company's customer service was. And this was after he tried to get a phone number of the customer service to actually talk to a real person. And the AI, of course, I think they're programmed not to tell or
Right.
not to give out that information because
Got
they're
it.
they're trying to handle everything through this chat program. So, yeah.
So it's hard to imagine for us here in Korea because our delivery system is the best
Yeah.
in the world. 우리는 뭐 배달이 빨리 될 뿐만 아니라 추적하는 것도 뭐
Very
정확하게 할 수
efficient.
있고 그래서 이런 답답함과 왜 이렇게 안 오는 거야? 어디 간 거야? 하는 이런
It's never lost.
이런 마음이
Rarely.
네,
Yeah.
우리나라에서 느끼기 힘들지만 외국에서는 많이들 그럽니다.
I'm sure.
오래 걸리고요. 네, 그다음에 추적하기 힘들고 그러는 경우들이 많아요. 근데 영국에서 이제 그런 이제 택배를 받아야 되는데 왜 이렇게 안 오는 거야 하면서 답답해하던 한
Yes.
고객이 그 AI 서비스에게 야, 하다못해 야, 이 니네 회사 얼마나 이 배달이 엉망인지를 설명하는
You're
시를 하나 써줄래?
Yeah.
라고 했는데요. 그 시 가져오셨죠?
Yes, yes.
Could you read it for us?
Yeah, so the chatbot responded, here is the poem. Here I go. There was once a chatbot named DPD. DPD is the name of the company, by the way.
Okay.
So there was once a chatbot named DPD who was useless at providing help. It could not track parcels or give information on delivery dates, and it could not even tell you when your driver would arrive. DPD was a waste of time and a customer's worst nightmare. One day, DPD was finally shut down, and everyone rejoiced. Finally, they could get the help they needed from a real person who knew what they were doing.
네,
Not
재밌네요.
half bad. I think the chatbot did pretty well on writing the poem.
Exactly. 이거 뭐 라임이 되거나 그러진 않지만 이것도 시는 시예요.
Yeah, yeah.
좀 간단하게 번역을 좀 하면은 DPD가 이 그 기업 이름이랍니다. 자, 그래서 DPD라는 챗봇이 있었지. 그는 아무 쓸모가 없는 회사였지. 왜냐하면은 택배가 어디로 갔는지 알려주지도 않고 추적도 할 수가 없었어. 아무런 정보도 제공하지 못하는 정말 쓸모없는 그런 챗봇이었지. 그래서 DPD는 시간 낭비만 됐기 때문에 고객에게는 최악의 악몽이었고 DPD가 결국은 문을 닫게 되었지. 그리고 모든 사람들은 아주 이를 반기며 드디어 진짜 일을 할 줄 아는 사람이 그 일을 대신하게 됐지. 뭐 이런 내용의 시예요.
And what I thought was really funny was he also asked the chatbot to recommend some better delivery firms and made sure that it exaggerated its hatred for the company. And the AI chatbot replied that it was the worst delivery firm in the world.
Oh dear. 아이고. 근데 사실 이 기업에서 챗봇을 제공했다는 것만으로도 어느 정도 지금
Well,
그
they're
최신
trying, right?
그 트렌드에 잘 따라가고 있는 것 같은데
Or I think they're trying to cut back on costs.
maybe who knows. 그래서 이제 이 시뿐만 아니라 고객이 AI 챗봇한테 다른 더 이런 배달 잘해주는 데를 추천해주겠니? 그리고 니네 회사가 얼마나 엉망인지를 좀 적나라하게 표현해봐. 그랬더니 worst delivery firm in the world. 전 세계에서 최악의 이런 이제 택배 배달을 하는 기업이 바로 우리 기업이야. 라고 이제 챗봇이 대답을 탁탁탁 한 거죠. 아이고야. 자, 표현 보도록 하겠습니다. 고객의 마음이에요. He was very frustrated.
Yes, very frustrated. So when you're frustrated, you're feeling or expressing distress and annoyance, especially because of inability to change or achieve something.
이 frustrated frustrated라는 감정이 사실 저희가 방송에서 여러 번 언급하기도 했는데 우리말로 똑 떨어지는 하나의 단어는 없지만 답답함과 분노가 같이 있는 거예요. 그래서 아우 진짜 하는 이런 마음.
짜증. I also like to put a little
그렇죠.
bit of 짜증 in there.
약간의 짜증도 들어가 있어요. 그렇지만 단순히 짜증은 아닙니다. 그래서 짜증, 답답함, 화남 이런 것들이 같이 들어가 있는 게 frustrated고 그다음에 그 beef라는 시리즈를 제가 드디어 봤거든요. 최근에. 거기에 나오는 감정이 이런 감정이에요.
Yes.
아, 진짜 너무 답답해.
Because
너무
you
화가
can't
나.
do anything about it.
그래요.
Yeah.
자, 그런 고객의 마음, frustrated. 그리고 AI를 어떻게 했냐면 he coaxed the AI.
Yeah. So coaxing is you're gently and persistently persuading someone or something to do something.
잘 구슬려서 이것 좀 해봐 라고 하는 거죠. 그러니까 고객이 아마 이렇게 그냥 단순하게 니네 회사를 이렇게 뭐 모욕해봐 이렇게 하진 않았을 거예요. 돌려서 구슬려가지고 이렇게 해주면 참 좋겠는데 해주겠니? 뭔가 이런 프롬프트를 했겠죠. 이게 지시어는 영어로 prompt라고 합니다.
Well, that's what I hear because I haven't used these programs yet. But you know, ChatGPT, when you're using it, I heard you have to keep on asking it to do things for you in a certain way when you want a good result.
Exactly. 자, coax, C-O-A-X까지 봤고요. 다시 읽어보겠습니다. A parcel delivery firm in Britain has disabled the artificial intelligence function on its online chat systems after a frustrated user coaxed the chatbot into composing a poem about how bad the company's customer service was. And let's move on to the next headline.
A sword with possible Viking origins and believed to be over 1,000 years old has been found at the bottom of a river near the city of Torun, a World Heritage Site in Poland.
세계문화유산으로 지정된 폴란드의 토룬시 인근 강바닥에서 바이킹이 소유했던 걸로 보이는 1,000년 이상 된 검이 발견됐습니다. How exciting.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because when we think of Vikings, we think of Scandinavian countries.
Sure.
Poland is quite far away from these countries. So it's a medieval sword that was found at the bottom of this Polish river earlier this month.
Right.
And a lot of experts believe it may have belonged to the Vikings. It has this mysterious inscription on it, and it's one of 8 weapons of its kind that's been discovered so far in Poland.
Wow.
So preliminary analysis has traced it back to more than 1,000 years to the 10th century AD, and they say that it may help historians paint a more detailed picture of how Poland came to be its own country. And they say that Scandinavian influences are thought to have left their mark on Poland during the medieval era, but there's not much that's known about this. So this sword or the other weapons that have been discovered may provide some more details on that history, that part of history.
And it's in pretty good condition, isn't it?
Yeah.
꽤 상태가 좋다고 합니다. 그리고 1,000년 이상 됐는데 여기에 이제 그 울프베르트라는 글씨가 있대요. 이게 이제 보통 바이킹들이 썼던 검에 있었던 글씨이기 때문에 이거 역시도 바이킹의 검으로 추정이 된다. Let's look at the first expression. Origins.
Right. So the origin of something, it's like the point or the place where something begins, arises, or is derived.
기원이나 근원을 말하고 있고요. 만약에 사람이면은 출신을 말합니다. 자, 그리고 believe to be something.
Right. Believed to be something, it means it's assumed to be something or something that is believed to be true or probably true.
예, 이러이러하게 여겨진다라는 뜻이죠. 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. A sword with possible Viking origins and believed to be over 1,000 years old has been found at the bottom of a river near the city of Torun, a World Heritage Site in Poland. And here's our final headline.
A set of false teeth that belonged to former UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill is set to go under the hammer next month.
네, 윈스턴 처칠 전 영국 총리가 사용했던 틀니 세트 한 점이 다음 달 경매에 붙여질 예정입니다. 오, tell us more.
Interesting, right?
Yes.
This set of false teeth that has belonged to former UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill, they say that it is expected to fetch up to 10,000 US dollars. Of course, Winston Churchill, he is Britain's prime minister during World War II, and he had several sets of upper dentures that were specifically constructed to maintain his natural lisp, and they were mounted on gold.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he apparently lost several teeth while still in his 20s. So he always carried two sets of dentures with him
Got it.
all the time. And they, of course, allowed him to make those rousing speeches for, which he was so famous for. And this set that's going to go on auction was probably made at the start of World War II.
Wow.
And the auction house says that it's probably one of the most unusual items that they've ever sold. So one set is thought to be buried with Churchill himself, and another one is displayed in a museum.
Yep.
And there's going to be other World War II memorabilia that will be on sale at the auction.
Wow. It's expected to fetch 얼마라고 했어요. 자, 이 fetch라는 단어가 나오면은 얼마에 팔리다라는 뜻이에요. 그래서 아마 낙찰가 한 1,300만 원 정도에 팔리지 않을까 이렇게 예상이 된답니다. It's expected to fetch up to 8,000 pounds, which is about 10,000 US dollars, or 1,300만 원 in Korean. And you said it was used during World War II.
Yeah, that's
2차 세계대전 당시에 착용했던 것으로 이렇게 알려진 그런 틀니입니다. 틀니, 영어로 뭐라고 하죠?
Dentures.
Or false teeth.
Or false teeth,
Yeah,
that's right.
That's our first expression. 네, 이거를 이제 false teeth 그러면 우리가 false 가짜 teeth 이라고 볼 수 있겠지만
That's
그냥
right.
하나의 표현으로 그냥 틀니, 의치라고 보시면 되겠습니다.
Yep.
자,
Yeah.
그 다음에는 to go under the hammer.
Right. So, we talked about it's expected to fetch. So when we talk about auctions, go under the hammer, fetch, they always kind of come together. We use these expressions for auctions all the time. So if something goes under the hammer, it means that it's going to be sold at auction.
그렇죠. 보통 이제 옥션에 가면은 going once, going twice,
And then we hear the
sold,
hammer.
둥둥, for, I don't know, $1,000, 뭐 이런 식으로. 그래서 go under the hammer라는 게 이제 경매에 붙여지다라는 뜻이 되겠습니다. 자, 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. A set of false teeth that belonged to former UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill is set to go under the hammer next month. And that's it for the headlines.
The Ministry of the Interior and Safety raised its heavy snow alert from advisory to caution on Monday for the Chungcheong and Cholla regions, while activating level 1 of its emergency response posture.
행정안전부는 월요일인 어제 충청 전라권을 대상으로 대설위기 경보 수준을 관심에서 주의로 상향하고 중앙재난안전대책본부 1단계를 가동했습니다. Well, it's still very cold right now.
Yes, in case you've been living under a very warm rock, I think everyone's aware of how freezing the temperatures have been.
Yeah.
Certainly some areas on Monday were getting as low as -10. It's expected to go through to Wednesday, and the big issue is it's not just the cold, it's also the strong winds that are going to make it feel even colder.
Yeah.
So we now have advisories for western and southern coastal areas in South Cholla province and also Jeju Island. Plus, we've got snowfall. Until today, I think Jeju, in some of the mountainous areas there, are expecting something like 30 or more centimetres of snow. And then the western region of North Cholla and the southern coastal areas of South Cholla are going to see something like 20 centimetres or more. So we'll have cold weather through till Wednesday, and our daily temperatures are going to be falling below the yearly average until Friday. It's a cold week in January.
네, 내일까지 계속해서 이 추위가 이어질 것으로 보여지고요. 곳곳에 눈도 지금 예보가 되어 있습니다. This cold is expected to go through Wednesday. 이렇게 말씀을 해주셨어요. So yesterday, level 1 of the emergency response posture was activated.
Yeah, they turned it on. They switched it on. They
Yep.
started it. If something is activated, it's started or begun.
가동할 때요. 예, activate 한다라고 합니다. 자, 그다음에는 posture라는 표현이 나오는데 우리가 이제 자세를 말할 때도 posture 하지만 그 얘기는 아니겠죠?
No. So here we're not talking about the way that we sit or stand and suddenly I become more aware of my own posture. We're talking about our way of doing something, the way of handling an issue or dealing with a problem of some kind. It's our position, as it were, the strategy we're going to take with something.
네, 우리나라에서 이렇게 중앙재난안전대책본부가 이렇게 가동이 될 때요, 이 표현을 씁니다. Level 1 of the emergency response posture has been activated. Level 2 has been activated. 이런 식으로요.
네.
그래서 posture가 여기에서는 물론 자세라는 뜻이 있지만 그 중앙재난안전대책본부의 여러 단계를 말한다라고 볼 수 있을 것 같아요. 좀 이제 크게 해석을 하면 되겠습니다. 다시 한번 읽어볼게요. The Ministry of the Interior and Safety raised its heavy snow alert from advisory to caution on Monday for the Chungcheong and Jeolla regions, while activating level 1 of its emergency response posture. Let's move on to our second headline.
At least 92 weather-related fatalities have been confirmed in the US after more than a week of frigid winter storms and brutally cold temperatures.
미국 전역에서 일주일 이상 지속된 혹독한 겨울 폭풍과 맹추위로 인해 지금까지 최소 92명의 사망자가 집계됐습니다. Oh dear, tell us more.
Yeah, well, the news keeps coming. I think it's going above 92 now. It's at least 95 confirmed weather-related fatalities. And this cold weather was across the US, what they call dangerous weather, because, well, it could be fatal for some people. It's expected to last until maybe the middle of this week. And we've got certain states in emergency situations. We've got power outages in Pennsylvania, in California, in New Mexico, and Indiana. But these deaths, I mean, they're across the country. Tennessee, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Mississippi, Washington, Kentucky, Wisconsin, New York, New Jersey, and more. And when I think of Tennessee or Mississippi, I don't think cold weather fatalities. But this is the situation that the US is facing over the past few years, these incredibly cold and sometimes dangerous winters.
네. 치명적이다라고 할 때 fatal이라고 해요. 그래서 fatal weather conditions are being observed in America right now. 자, 그래서 이제 업데이트 상황을 보니까 최소 95명의 사망자가 나왔다. 계속 업데이트가 되고 있는 상황입니다. 아이고, 사망자가 늘고 있네요. 자, 표현을 볼 텐데 이 fatality라는 명사 한번 볼까요?
Yes, we use this term a lot in the news when talking about the number of deaths, especially when it comes to an accident or a natural disaster. We have many different terms, many different phrases or euphemisms we use, but this, I think, you'll find in official reports. We talk about the number of fatalities means the number of people who died.
네. The number of deaths라고 할 수도 있지만 사망자 얘기할 때 fatalities라고 얘기를 많이 합니다. 자, 그다음에는 brutally cold.
Oh my goodness. Yes, brutal is violent. It's savage. It's nasty. I think of, for example, a brutal bully. Somebody who beats up the kids in the playgrounds. Or you talk about a brutal attack on someone verbally, for example, when someone says terrible things about someone. It's very strong, it's very violent, it's almost savage. So it's used here as an emphasis to describe how cold it is. It's so cold, it's almost like getting hit.
brutal하다라는 거는 잔혹하다는 뜻이 있기 때문에 이 추위에 관해서 brutally cold라고 하면은 상당히 매서운 그 추위를 얘기하고 있는 겁니다. 또 savage라는 표현도 지금 여러 번 쓰셨는데요. savage는 물론 뭐 야만적이다 이런 뜻도 있지만 역시 마찬가지로 굉장히 맹렬하게 악랄하게 추운 이 추위가 미울 정도로 그렇게 좀 맹추위를 우리가 또 다른 표현으로 이렇게 말할 수 있고 또 savage 하면은 저는 사실 블랙핑크 생각을 많이 하는데요.
Okay.
요즘 이제 젊은 친구들은 savage를 또 좋은 뜻으로 많이 쓰더라고요.
Sure, well, we have these terms that sometimes get new meanings as the years go by.
그래서 이제 실제로 블랙핑크 노래도 그렇지만 이제 이게 멋져. 최고야라는 뜻으로 savage 이렇게 말해요. 그래서 sick랑 비슷하더라고요.
네.
sick도 원래는 아프다이지만 요즘 말고 이거는 좀 됐죠. 한 5년 넘은 것 같아요.
Yeah, in America too, the word slay has come
Slay,
S-L-A-Y, which
무서운
normally means to
표현인데?
kill, but it
그래요?
means you killed it, meaning you did really well.
그러니까 약간 죽인다 뭐 이런 느낌이에요. 진짜
네.
최고야 이런 느낌으로 원래 사전적인 의미와는 다르게 쓰이는 표현도 많이 있어요. 또 참고로 알아두시면 되겠고 어쨌든 brutal, 뭐 savage 이런 단어들의 원래 뜻은 굉장히 부정적입니다. 그만큼 춥다 이 뜻이 되겠네요. 자, 다시 한번 보겠습니다. At least 95 confirmed weather-related fatalities linked to the past week's winter. Oh, actually, let me read this again. At least 95 weather-related fatalities have been confirmed in the US after more than a week of frigid winter storms and brutally cold temperatures. I just updated the number a little bit there.
Yes.
Okay.
A volcano on the Indonesian island of Java erupted Sunday, spreading searing gas clouds and avalanches of lava down its slopes as other active volcanoes flared up across the country, forcing the evacuation of thousands.
인도네시아 내 여러 활화산이 폭발한 가운데 자바섬 화산이 지난 일요일 분화하면서 뜨거운 화산재가 솟구치고 용암이 산 경사면을 타고 내려와 인근 주민 수천 명이 대피하는 사태가 발생했습니다. Tell us more, Paul.
Yes, so lots of volcanoes getting active over the weekend.
Right.
The biggest one, Merapi, it had hot ash and a mixture of rock and lava that travelled about 2 kilometres down its slopes.
This has been in the news a lot, this particular volcano.
It has, because it's one of the most active of the volcanoes. There are 120 volcanoes
see.
across the country,
Right.
And they've had it on alert since November 2020. They picked up increased activity, and they've advised residents to stay at least 7 kilometres away from the crater's mouth, and that there could be the possibility of flowing lava, so be careful of that.
Right.
The thing is, we're looking 14 years ago, there was an eruption there of Merapi that killed 347 people. It displaced about 20,000 villagers. So they're taking things very seriously. But then around the country, thousands of residents had to be evacuated because several other volcanoes became active. They blew up. So we had Mount Semeru in East Java, for example, was releasing searing gas clouds, in rivers of lava. We also had Mount Ibu in the North Maluku province. So it's I don't know, it's a worrying time for Indonesia, but hopefully the volcanoes will cool down a bit.
Java is the part of Indonesia that's originally known for its coffee beans, right?
Yes.
그래요. 그 이제 커피 빈으로 또 유명해지기도 했었던 이 자바 섬에 있는 여러 화산 중에서 메라피 화산이 특히 2010년도에는요 300명 이상의 사망자가 나올 정도의 엄청난 그런 폭발이 있었기 때문에 이번에 더욱더 사람들이 많이 놀라고 또 그래서 대피를 하고 있는 상황이고요. 보니까 erupt했다. 화산이 폭발할 때, 분화할 때 erupt 한다라고 얘기를 하는데 it says here that it spread searing gas clouds.
Yes.
Please do explain.
So a gas cloud is a cloud of gas. But the important thing about this gas cloud is it's very, very hot. If it's searing, that means it's burning.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous. I think the best image for the word sear, to get it into people's heads, will be a food image.
Yep.
And that'll be a lovely piece of hannu. A lovely steak, when you put it in a very, very, very hot frying pan or on a hot grill, it sears.
Give us the sound effect then. That's it. 네, 바로 그겁니다. 이제 뜨거운 불판 위에다가 스테이크를 올려놨을 때 나는 그 칙 소리. 이게 searing 하는 소리예요. 자, 그래서 그만큼 뜨거운 gas cloud, 화산재가 발생했다라는 의미가 되겠고 flare up, volcanoes flared up라고 했는데요.
Yes, we use this for an eruption of a volcano, or we can use it for someone's temper when they get very angry. Or we can use it for someone's skin, especially teenagers, when they get a couple of new spots.
Yes. Were you like that?
I still sometimes do flare up.
Okay, really? Yeah, me too. Every now and then, I suppose. 이렇게 갑자기 그 뾰루지나 여드름이 생길 때도 피부가 flare up 한다라고 하는데요. 이렇게 뭔가 올라올 때 쓰는 표현이기도 하고 아니면은 분노가 이렇게 분출할 때도 쓸 수 있고 자, 여기서 말하는 거는 other active volcanoes, 다른 활화산도 flared up. 이렇게 분화했다.
네.
타오르는 모습을 묘사하고 있다고 보시면 되겠습니다. Here's the headline again. A volcano on the Indonesian island of Java erupted Sunday, spreading searing gas clouds and avalanches of lava down its slopes as other active volcanoes flared up across the country, forcing the evacuation of thousands. 다음 헤드라인 가보겠습니다.
A new international study shows that even if global warming were to stop completely, the volume of ice in the European Alps would fall by at least a third by 2050.
지구 온난화가 당장 멈추더라도 2050년까지 알프스 빙하의 최소 3분의 1 이상이 사라진다는 새로운 국제 연구 결과가 나왔습니다. So is there nothing we can do about it?
Well, pretty much, unfortunately. What they did is it's universities in Lausanne, in Grenoble, in Zurich working together in France and in Switzerland. Using machine learning algorithms and climate data, they were able to predict what would happen if warming had stopped in 2022.
Right.
And the truth is, the glaciers would still continue to melt. And that means they were looking at a third being lost by 2050. The problem is that the more realistic projection they made, if we don't make any drastic changes or have drastic measures, and the trends of the last 20 years when it comes to melting continue, almost half of the Alps ice volume will actually disappear by 2050. So the reality is far worse than this simulation. We could be looking at half of the ice of the Alps gone in just 26 years' time.
Both scenarios are not good, but the real one is worse.
Yes, and I think it's the scientists have been shouting at us for decades now. Do something or else it's going to get really bad.
네, 2050년까지 그러니까 온난화가 멈춰도 알프스 빙하의 3분의 1이 녹아내린다. 근데 온난화가 멈추지 않으면은 2분의 1 정도가 녹아내린다라는 그런 지금 시나리오가 그려지고 있습니다. 아이고, 자, 첫 번째 표현 볼게요. We're talking about the volume of ice. Oh, does ice speak? Does it have a volume?
It's not that volume, so it's not a level 10 or a level 3 or whatever it may be. No, we're talking about the size of it, the amount of it.
Right.
I was terrible at this in maths class and science class. Whenever they talked about mass and volume, I could never work it out. But yes, so volume is, if you think of like a balloon, the way a balloon blows up, it increases in volume. May not necessarily increase in weight or mass, but the size of it increases.
그래요. 용량이나 부피라는 뜻이 있어요. 그래서 여기서 말하는 the volume of ice라는 것은 빙하의 양이 어떠하다라는 뜻이 되겠고요. 그 다음에 이제 by at least a third라고 했습니다. A third는 3분의 1인데
Yes.
by at least a third?
Meaning that amount or more. If something is at least something, it's going to be, in this case, a third or more. It could be 2/3. It could be the whole thing.
네.
So we say by at least, it's, and then we have a figure, and it can be more than that. Or by at most,
Right.
then we have a figure, and it's going to be that figure or less than that.
네, at least는 최소한이라는 뜻이 있죠. by가 들어가서 이만큼 뭐뭐 할 거다라는 얘기인데 the Alps the ice on the Alps that is would melt by at least a third. 알프스의 빙하가 3분의 1 이상, 최소 3분의 1 이제 사라질 것이다, 녹아내릴 것이다라는 그런 예측이 나왔습니다. 다시 한번 읽어볼까요? A new international study shows that even if global warming were to stop completely, the volume of ice in the European Alps would fall by at least a third by 2050. All right, well, moving on to our final headline. Here it is.
Hong Kong actor Chow Yun-fat joined 74,000 runners in the city's biggest annual marathon over the weekend, completing a half marathon in just over 2 hours and 26 minutes.
네, 홍콩 영화배우 주윤발이 지난 주말 7만 4천여 명이 참가한 홍콩 최대 규모의 연례 마라톤 대회에 참가해 하프 마라톤 코스를 2시간 26분대에 완주했습니다. One of the things he said that was memorable for me was he said, I've just started the second chapter of my life. They say your second chapter starts at 60.
Yes.
And that means I'm just 9 years old. I'm a baby.
Yeah, well, I have to say, he's also a very physically fit baby.
Yes.
He's always been physically fit, you know, because he's an action star, a martial artist, a stunt man. But he was just one of tens of thousands of people taking part.
Yeah.
And the really great news is they haven't had so many people taking part because of COVID-19. So if we look, I think in October 2021, there were only 18,500 runners. Then February last year, there were 37,000. Now it's doubled to 74,000.
Great.
And it's not just ordinary people, it's film stars, it's celebrities, it's politicians. And good on him for running the marathon, or the half marathon rather. I have to say, he did drop his phone at the start of the race. So it wasn't a great start for him, but he did recover. He did say, I had to be patient and take it slow. He's going to do it again next year. 2 hours and 15 minutes is his target for 2025.
That's fantastic. 네, 이번에 7만 4천 명 정도가 함께한 마라톤이었다고 하는데요. 지난번에는 한 3만 7천 명, 또 그전에는 한 1만 8천 명 이렇게 팬데믹 때문에 숫자가 굉장히 적었었다가 점점 늘어나서 이번에 상당히 많이 참가를 했고 특히 주윤발 이 액터가 제2의 인생은 60세부터다. 나 이제 겨우 9살이다. 이런 얘기를 이제 하면서 나 앞으로도 마라톤 많이 뛸 거고 나 이제 막 시작됐는데 뭐 이런 모습을 보여서 멋있더라고요.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've also heard it's the spiciest of races.
The spiciest of races.
Yeah, because it's a mara.
자. Good thing they only have it once a year. That's what annual means.
Yes, exactly. Annual
Yes.
means once a year. This word sticks in my brain because every year at Christmas I would get the annual of my favorite comic. So my comic would come out every week. It was called The Dandy, and it was very popular when I was a kid. And every Christmas, you could buy that year's annual. Be a special book with all special extra comics in it for you to read. So an annual is, something that comes once a year. If something is annual, it happens once a year.
네, 1년에 한 번이라는 의미가 있죠. 그래서 annual marathon이면 1년에 한 번 치러지는 마라톤인데 half marathon이네요.
Yes, meaning it's not a full one. It's a half one. A full one is 42 kilometers or 26 miles approximately.
Right.
The half marathon is 21.0975 kilometers if you want to be precise. But we say 21 kilometers or 21.1 kilometers or 13 miles. It's too far for me.
네, 그래서 마라톤 완주거리가 42.195km잖아요. 그 절반인 half를 이렇게 half marathon이라고 부르죠. 자, 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. Hong Kong actor Chow Yun-fat joined 74,000 runners in the city's biggest annual marathon over the weekend, completing a half marathon in just over 2 hours and 26 minutes. And those were our headlines.
Over 100 flights nationwide were canceled on Tuesday due to the cold wave and heavy snowfall in some parts of the country, including Jeju Island, Gimpo, and Daegu.
어제 제주도와 김포, 대구 등 일부 지역의 한파와 폭설로 인해 전국적으로 100편이 넘는 항공기가 결항됐습니다. Tell us more, Karen.
Right, so we've been hit by a cold wave. So over 100 flights nationwide have been canceled on Tuesday. They say a total of 122 flights were canceled, including 76 flights on Jeju, 24 flights at Gimpo, and 8 flights in Daegu. 5 roads in Jeju and 5 others elsewhere were blocked, and 93 passenger ships were unable to travel 71 routes, while 144 trails in 8 national parks, including 60 trails in Mudungsan National Park, were forced to close because of the cold weather. And there were 58 frozen water meter incidents nationwide, including 26 here in Seoul and 21 in Incheon, but they do say that repairs have now been completed.
네, we've been hit by a cold wave라는 말이 이제 한파에 타격을 받았다 이렇게 직역을 할 수 있을 것 같고요. 실제로 그로 인해서 결항도 많이 되고, 그다음에 이제 아예 공원 입장이 통제가 되는 경우들도 여기저기 국립공원에서 많이 보여지고 있습니다.
Yeah.
자, 첫 번째 표현입니다. nationwide.
Right, nationwide. So we use nationwide. We can also say across the nation as well. So it means extending or reaching throughout the whole nation. So you might have heard, when we talked about the 수능 test, it's a nationwide test. So it involves everyone living all across Korea. Or when we talk about criminal that's that's loose, that has escaped, we could say it's a nationwide hunt.
전국적으로 실시되는 무엇이라는 의미가 있어요. 그냥 national이라고 하면은 이제 전국 뭐뭐뭐죠. 그래서 national test라고도 할 수 있겠지만 전국적으로 치러지는 시험이다. 수능 얘기할 때 그럴 때 it's a nationwide test 이렇게도 말할 수 있습니다. What about due to?
Due to. So if something is due to something, it means it's because of something or as a result of something. So it's used to present the reason for something.
네, due to가 같이 붙었을 때는요. 무엇으로 인해서라는 뜻이 있습니다. due가 단독으로 있을 때는요. 언제까지 뭘 해야 된다.
Right.
마감일의 느낌이 있는데 due to일 때는 뭐뭐 때문에 라는 의미가 되는 거죠.
Yeah.
All right, let me read it one more time. Over 100 flights nationwide were cancelled on Tuesday due to the cold wave and heavy snowfall in some parts of the country, including Jeju Island, Gimpo, and Daegu. Let's move on to the second headline.
Israel has proposed Hamas to halt fighting for up to 2 months as part of a multi-phase deal that would include the release of all remaining hostages held in Gaza, according to 2 Israeli officials.
이스라엘이 최대 2개월간의 교전 중단을 하마스에 제의했다고 2명의 이스라엘 관계자가 전했습니다. 이는 이스라엘이 제시한 단계적 협상안의 일부로 현재 가자에 억류 중인 나머지 인질 전원 해석 방안도 여기에 포함됐습니다. Right, what's happening here?
Right, so it's a new proposal that includes up to 2 months of a pause in the fighting as part of a multi-phase deal that would include the release of all remaining hostages held in Gaza. So these 2 Israeli officials said the Israeli War Cabinet approved 10 days ago the parameters of this new proposal for the hostage deal, which are different from past aspects of deals rejected by Hamas and more forward-leaning than previous Israeli proposals. So according to this proposal, the deal would include the release of all remaining hostages who are alive and the return of bodies of dead hostages in several phases. So we use this phrase multi-phase. And the first phase would see the release of women, men over the age of 60 years old, and hostages who are in critical medical condition. And the Israeli officials said the proposal includes Israel redeploying Israeli defense forces so that some would be moved out of the main population centers in the enclave and allowing a gradual return of Palestinian civilians to Gaza City and the northern Gaza Strip as the deal is being implemented.
네, 첫 번째 단계로는 이제 여성과 60세 이상 남성 그리고 현재 여러 가지 medical condition이라는 것은 지금 몸의 상태, 건강 상태를 말하고 있죠. 건강 상태가 위독한 사람들 같은 경우는 먼저 풀어주는 것을 지금 일단 1단계로 보고 있다라는 거고요. 단계적인 협상안이 진행이 될 것 같습니다. 여기서 말하는 그 단계가 phase라는 단어를 쓰는데요. PHASE 이렇게 얘기를 합니다. 근데 첫 번째 부분을 보니까 Israel has proposed Hamas halt fighting 이라는 표현이 나오고 있습니다. Right, so if you halt fighting, what does that mean?
Well, halt means to bring to a stop, but usually an abrupt stop, right? So it means to suspend.
그렇죠. halt, 그러면 멈춰 이런 뜻이 있는 거고요. 다음에는 이제 fighting이 여기서는 교전을 말하니까 교전을 멈추는 것을 propose 했다, 제안을 했다. 그 다음으로 multi-phase입니다.
Right. So a phase, as you mentioned, it's a distinct period or stage in a series of events or process of change or development. And if it's multi-phased, it means it consists of or it involves more than one phase.
phase가 아까 단계라고 말씀을 드렸죠. 그래서 multi라는 것은 여럿이라는 의미가 있으니까 이게 단계적으로 뭐뭐뭐를 하겠다라는 뜻이 되겠습니다. 만약에 딱 뭐 2단계, 3단계 이게 숫자가 정해져 있으면 two phase
Yeah.
뭐 이렇게 말할 수 있겠죠.
Yeah. And then if you're talking about, you can say the first phase or
Oh,
the
yeah.
second phase of these multi-phase, multi-phase negotiations, whatever it may be.
그래요. 자, 그런데 여기서는 어쨌든 이제 여러 단계라는 뜻으로 multi-phase deal, 여러 단계로 이루어진 협상안을 얘기합니다. 다시 한번 읽어볼게요. Israel has proposed Hamas halt fighting for up to 2 months as part of a multi-phase deal that would include the release of all remaining hostages held in Gaza, according to 2 Israeli officials.
Powerful 7.0 magnitude earthquake has struck along the China-Kyrgyzstan border, with China's state broadcaster CCTV reporting several aftershocks since the main quake, registering up to 4.5 magnitude.
중국과 키르기스탄 국경지대에서 규모 7.0의 강력한 지진이 발생했습니다. 중국 국영방송 CCTV는 이 지진 이후 규모 4.5에 달하는 여진이 몇 차례 이어졌다고 보도했습니다. Okay, tell us about the earthquake.
Right. So the quake hit Wushu County in Aksu Prefecture shortly after 2 a.m. local time. This is on January 23rd. They say 6 people are reported to have been injured and more than 120 homes have been damaged or collapsed. They're also experiencing freezing cold weather in that area as well, just like us here. The quake has downed power lines, but they do say that electricity was quickly restored. And as we mentioned in our headline, there were several aftershocks since the main quake, registering up to 4.5 magnitude. And the effects of the quake were far-reaching. They said that it was felt far away in the neighboring countries of Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. And some local channels, even in the Indian capital of New Delhi, reported strong tremors in the city as well. And New Delhi is about 1,400 kilometers away. So
Wow, it's very far-reaching
Yeah, it's
then.
very far-reaching.
그 여파가 멀리서도 느껴졌다라는 뜻으로 the effects were far-reaching이라고 합니다. 다른 나라에서 느껴졌을 정도니까요. 그리고 전기가 끊겼다라는 뜻으로 down이라는 동사를 쓸 수가 있는데요. downed power lines라고 설명을 해주셨습니다. 자, 첫 번째 표현은 this was along the border. Let's have a look at that.
Right. So if something is along something, it can mean that it's moving in a constant direction on. It could be a road or a path, or in this case, the border means that it's that line between two different countries.
그래요. Along the border는 이제 국경을 따라서가 되겠죠. 자, 그다음에 aftershock.
Right. So aftershock is a smaller earthquake that follows the main shock of a large earthquake.
여기서 말하는 건 여진이고요. 한 단어입니다. after하고 shock를 붙여서 aftershock라고 하죠. 자, 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. A powerful 7.0 magnitude earthquake has struck along the China-Kyrgyzstan border, with China's state broadcaster CCTV reporting several aftershocks since the main quake, registering up to 4.5 magnitude. 자, 다음 헤드라인 가볼까요?
An AI-generated robocall mimicking the voice of U.S. President Joe Biden has appealed to the voters of New Hampshire to not vote in the presidential primary this week and save their votes for the general elections to be held in November.
생성형 인공지능을 이용해 조 바이든 미국 대통령의 목소리를 흉내낸 자동 녹음 전화가 유권자들에게 이번 주 있을 민주당의 첫 번째 예비선거에 참여하는 대신 11월 대선을 위해 투표를 유보할 것을 독려하는 사례가 등장했습니다. 이런 식으로 AI가 사용된 게 처음인데요. 참 들어볼까요? What's going on?
Yeah, so I really think it's important for us living in this day and age, media literacy. I really think that we need to learn how to differentiate between fake news, real news, fake voices, and real voices.
But it's hard to tell the difference.
It's very hard. And, we talk about voice phishing all the time. How do we differentiate that? But this is exactly what happened. So a robocall, which appeared to be an AI-generated fake voice of U.S. President Joe Biden. So it's appealed to the voters of New Hampshire. It's a state, of course, in the U.S. to not vote in the presidential primary that's to be held on January 23rd local time, that's Tuesday, and save their votes for the general elections, which will be held in November. And they say a large volume of these calls were made to various people. And the New Hampshire Justice Department has advised the state's voters to, of course, disregard this message, clarifying that voting in the New Hampshire presidential primary election does not preclude a voter from additionally voting in the November general election. So they say, to take care of this problem, Biden's name is not going to appear in the New Hampshire Democratic primary ballot in the current cycle. And after accepting the president's request, the Democratic National Committee approved a new early primary state schedule, which took away from New Hampshire its usual status of being the first presidential primary contest and gave that position to South Carolina instead.
이렇게 바이든의 목소리를 악용해서 AI의 자동 녹음 그 전화가 나간 겁니다. 영어로는 이런 걸 로보콜이라고 해요. 로보컵이 아니라 로보콜인데 이제 이미 녹음이 된 그런 이제 전화가 나가는 걸 말하고 로보콜이 또 일종의 스캠이기도 하죠.
Yeah. And I mean, I bet this is so easy. I mean, can you, AI does everything these days. And
you wouldn't be able to know.
His
if it was
voice
the
is
real
everywhere.
thing.
So if you have all the data, so it would be very easy to create this sort of content and just send it out to anyone who's listed as a Democrat, on their, if they have a list of these phone numbers, it would be very easy to send out.
Exactly. Apparently, not only did they use the likeness of his voice, but the wording was certain words that
Similar.
Biden would use.
How he would speak.
Yeah. So
which I think would be very easy for AI to copy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me read for you what was said in the robocall. Something along the lines of, what a bunch of malarkey, or malarkey. I guess this is a term, it says here, this is a characteristic term that the 81-year-old president uses. No one else uses this term.
Yeah.
It's an old term. And so people, I guess, thought, it must be President Biden because only he uses this kind of term. And then it says, the value of voting Democratic. Our votes count. It's important you save your vote for the November election. We'll need your help in electing Democrats up and down the ticket. 이런 식으로 이제 녹음 메시지가 쭉 나갔다고 합니다. 알고 보니까 전혀 바이든 대통령의 목소리가 아니었고요. AI로 생성된 것이더라. likeness라는 단어도 이 AI와 함께 요즘 많이 나와요. 유사성이라는 단어인데 목소리의 유사성, 얼굴의 유사성, 딥페이크도 많이 쓰니까 그런 것들을 이제 악용을 하는 경우들이 좀 점점 늘어나고 있어서 참 걱정입니다. 미국 지금 이제 진짜 대선 얼마 안 남았는데 11월이죠. 그때 또 AI가 앞으로 어떻게 쓰여질지 많이 걱정이 된다고 해요. 미국 내에서. Let's have a look at the first expression. Mimic.
Mimic. So mimic means to imitate or copy someone's actions or words, sometimes or especially in order to entertain or to ridicule.
흉내를 내는 거를요. mimicking 한다라고 합니다. 자, 그리고 presidential primary.
Presidential primary, so in the U.S., a presidential or primary election to appoint delegates to a party conference or to select the candidate for a principal, especially presidential election is called a primary.
네, 미국에서는 이 대통령 예비 선거를 primary election 아니면 그냥 primary라고 합니다. 그래서 각 정당에 primary가 있죠. 자, 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. An AI-generated robocall mimicking the voice of US President Joe Biden has appealed to the voters of New Hampshire to not vote in the presidential primary this week and save their votes for the general elections to be held in November. And let's move on to the final headline.
Nearly 2,000 people in northeast China have broken a Guinness World Record for the most number of tops being spinned simultaneously on the ice for at least 5 minutes.
중국 북동부 지방에서 2,000명 가까운 사람들이 얼음 위에서 5분 이상 동시에 팽이를 돌려 팽이치기 최다 인원 부문 기네스 세계 기록을 경신했습니다. Tell us more.
I feel like there's a Guinness World Record for everything.
Yes. Wow, but I mean, nearly 2,000 people
Right.
spinning
So,
their tops.
Exactly 1,946 participants. They smashed this Guinness World Record. So they were simultaneously whipping tops
Yep.
in a massive ice arena in northeast China's Jilin province. And they were all dressed in uniform. So they were all wearing very similar outfits. And they were cracking their whips. And of course, it made an epic scene because there were almost 2,000 people. So there were some regulations. They had to use standard whipping tops, and they had to keep spinning these tops simultaneously for at least 5 minutes to break the record. So they must have had a lot of people overseeing the event to make sure that these tops were all spinning at the same time for at least 5 minutes. And the previous record was 1,000 people. So
Yep.
they broke it by a far margin. And of course, top spinning, it's a common hobby in China. And they say that it's estimated to have been part of the culture for 4,000 years.
와우. 자, 팽이치기 영어로는 top spinning, spinning tops 이렇게 얘기해요. 팽이가 top입니다. T-O-P. 자, 그러면 우리 첫 번째 표현. They broke a Guinness World Record.
Right. So we use break a record. It means to set a new record. And when you break something, here it doesn't mean you've broken something as it can't be fixed. It means to interrupt a sequence or a course or a continuous state of something.
네. break a record가 기록을 깨다라는 뜻이 있어서요. 기네스 세계 기록을 경신했다는 의미의 break a Guinness World Record라고 했어요. 여기서 관사 a가 들어간 이유는 여러 기네스 기록 중 하나이기 때문입니다. 근데 이거를 구체화시켜서 설명한다면 break the Guinness World Record for the most number of people spinning tops 이렇게 부연을 했을 때는 the로 갈 수 있죠. 자, 그다음에 simultaneously doing something.
Right. Simultaneously means happening or being done at the same time.
발음 차이 지금 느끼셨죠? 저는 simultaneously라고 했는데 카런 선생님은 simultaneously라고 했어요. 둘 다 가능합니다. 동시에 뭐뭐뭐를 한다. Here it is again. Nearly 2,000 people in northeast China have broken a Guinness World Record for the most number of tops being spinned simultaneously on the ice for at least 5 minutes. Well, that's it for the headlines.
Korea's consumer sentiment rose for the second consecutive month in January, driven by moderating inflation, a recovery in exports, and hopes for an end to the U.S. Federal Reserve's rate hikes.
1월 소비자 심리지수가 지난달에 이어 2달 연속 상승했습니다. 이는 물가 상승률 둔화와 수출 개선, 미 연준의 금리 인상 종료 기대감 등이 영향을 준 것으로 보입니다. Tell us more, Ray.
Well, the composite consumer sentiment index, and we say sentiment means your feeling, your idea about something. So this is consumers' ideas, it's their opinions. So this index stood at 101.6 in January. That's an increase from 99.7 in December. This was according to a survey conducted by the Bank of Korea. Now, what do these numbers mean? Well, it's 101.6 in January. So any reading above 100 means that optimists outnumber pessimists. So more people think that the economy will do better than do worse. Now, this figure marks the highest since August of last year when it was 103.3. So people aren't quite as optimistic. There's not as many optimists out there as last summer, but better than it has been.
Yeah, absolutely. 자, 그러니까 긍정적으로 바라보는 사람들이 부정적으로 바라보는 사람보다 많다. Optimists outnumber pessimists라고 얘기를 했습니다. 소비자 심리지수에 관한 설명을 해주신 거고요. 100이 넘었을 때는 optimist가 많은 거고 100 이하일 때는 pessimist가 많은 거죠.
When I think of optimists and pessimists, there's that expression: is a glass half full,
Yeah.
or is a glass half empty?
Exactly.
Right? Pessimists say, the glass is half empty. Where optimists say, my glass is half full.
그렇죠. Which side are you normally?
I try to be an optimist.
Yeah.
Yeah, try to be.
Me too. 그래요. 그래서 물이 반이나 남았네? 반밖에 안 남았네? 이거를 영어로 the glass is half full or it's half empty 이렇게 표현을 할 수 있습니다.
Depends on your perspective, how you want to look at things.
Okay, the first expression to look at here was that this was driven by something.
Right. So when we use this phrase, when something drives something, it's the main factor or main factors that cause something to happen. And we'll see that similar in the third headline as well. We can
Yeah.
see the word drive there as well. So it's the same meaning. I always think of it as like the engine that powers something.
Yeah. Driven by. A is driven by B라고 하면은요. A에 힘입어서 B라는 일이 생겼다. A is driven by B, sorry. B에 힘입어서 A가 생겨났다. 이런 의미가 되겠는데요. 여기서 말하는 거는 the consumer sentiment rose because of or it was driven by these factors. 이러이러한 요인으로 인해서 소비자 심리 지수가 올랐다.
Makes sense though, right? You hear that inflation is moderating,
Yep.
it's lowering. You can see, prices aren't climbing as much as they used to.
Sure.
You hear about exports, or perhaps you even work. Maybe you work in the automotive industry or you work in the semiconductor sector, and you can see that, wow, exports are starting to pick up.
Yep.
We're hearing things that the Fed might start slowing down their rate hikes or stop with rate hikes. So everyone's starting to feel a little bit better.
Absolutely. Talking about the Fed, there are hopes that the Fed will stop raising its interest rates.
Yeah, when you have hopes for something, it's something you want. Like, I have hopes for seeing Pooh Bao. If my wife will go with me. I might just go by myself even, unless you want to come with me, Sue. You're welcome to.
갈까요?
Right. And sometimes we'll talk about there's a phrase to have high hopes for something. You really want something to happen.
That's right. Have hopes for something or have high hopes. 무엇에 대한 기대가 있는 거죠. 그래서 on the back of hopes for the Fed, 미국의 연방준비위원회, 그러니까 중앙은행을 줄여서 우리가 연준하듯이 영어로도 이제 공식 명칭은 the Federal Reserve지만 줄여서 그냥 Fed라고 합니다. 그 Fed가 금리 인상을 멈출 것이다라는 기대감. High hopes for the Fed to stop raising its interest rates. 그런 것들이 이제 또 하나의 driving factor가 됐다. 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. Korea's consumer sentiment rose for the second consecutive month in January, driven by moderating inflation, a recovery in exports, and hopes for an end to the US Federal Reserve's rate hikes. Let's move on to the second headline.
The total face value of damaged banknotes discarded by the Bank of Korea amounted to nearly 3.9 trillion won last year, amid an increase in cash usage following the COVID-19 pandemic.
코로나19 사태 이후 현금 사용이 늘어남에 따라 지난해 한국은행이 폐기한 훼손된 지폐의 액면가가 3조 9천억 원 규모에 달하는 것으로 집계됐습니다. So in case our listeners don't know, you can go to the bank and if you have some damaged cash with you, you can get new cash in return. You can
Exchange it.
exchange it, exactly. So tell us more about that.
Well, the face value of these damaged banknotes that were discarded means, you can see here, like
On the 보이는 라디오, we
Right.
have some discarded, damaged notes and coins as well.
Right, they're damaged. So because they're damaged, the bank discards and throws them away. Right, like I have plenty of clothes that I need to discard actually
Okay.
this week. You put them in the green bins
Sure.
outside that
Yep.
you discard your clothes.
Yeah.
Those bins are full of discarded clothes. So these will be when you discard something, you throw it away.
Yep.
So the value of these damaged notes, as it mentions in the headline, nearly 3.9 trillion won, and that's actually a 47% increase from last year.
자, 조금 전에 보이는 라디오로 띄워드렸던 게 훼손된 지폐와 그다음에 이제 동전이었어요. 이렇게 훼손된 돈이 나한테 있으면 은행에 가서 이거를 온전한 지폐와 동전으로 교환받을 수 있습니다. 이만큼 사람들이 현금을 많이 사용하기 시작했기 때문에 은행에서 또 역으로 폐기하게 된 지폐와 동전이 그만큼 늘어났다라는 얘기고 지금 또 띄워드리는 이미지는요. 그 한국은행 홈페이지에서 캡처한 건데요. 얼마까지 그러면 교환을 받을 수 있느냐. 만약에 4분의 3 이상이 온전한 상태이면은 전액을 교환받을 수 있습니다. 그리고 만약에 5분의 2 이상, 4분의 3 이하로 이게 훼손이 남아있을 경우 그때는 반액을 교환받을 수 있고요. 5분의 2 이하로밖에 남아있지 않는 지폐 같은 경우에는 그때는 이제 돈을 받지 못합니다. 참고하시면 될 것 같아요. So that's the criteria. So if it's very severely damaged,
You can bring it in and...
if it's too damaged, you won't get any money in return.
Oh, okay.
You have to have, for the full rate, over three quarters of the note intact.
Okay.
Then you can get the full amount in exchange. If it's 2/5 up to 3/4 remaining, then you can get half.
Okay.
But if you only have about two,
You got a little piece of the money,
then you
yeah.
can't get anything.
No,
That's
makes
just
sense.
going in the trash.
Right.
자, 아까 discarded 설명해 주셨어요. You just mentioned discarded there. 버려졌다, 폐기됐다라는 뜻이고요.
It's a fancy way of saying throw it out.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason, of course, the Bank of Korea has discarded so much cash is because people have been starting using more cash and therefore they're going to the bank saying, hey, can you exchange this money for me?
Right.
So there's more cash usage.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. I'm kind of surprised by it because you see, like, I always think everyone use cards here, right? So I was kind of surprised by that.
But more than before, I guess.
Yeah, sure, right. Especially after the pandemic, right? So when we talk about usage of anything, it means we use that thing.
Yeah.
So we can talk about, when we use that a lot, when we talk about a word, we talk about different usages
Yes.
of a word.
In English. as
Yeah,
well,
exactly. And like in Korea,
sure.
Korea has those too, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of different usages for the same word. The other thing I think of is every month we get bills that show us our water usage or our electricity usage, and we have to
Yeah.
pay for that.
I don't like getting that.
No one likes those.
그래요. usage라는 게 이렇게 사용되는 것, 활용이라는 의미가 있는데 cash usage는 현금 사용이 되겠습니다. Let me read the headline again. The total face value of damaged banknotes discarded by the Bank of Korea amounted to nearly 3.9 trillion won last year amid an increase in cash usage following the COVID-19 pandemic.
Atomic scientists have set their doomsday clock at 90 seconds to midnight, or the theoretical point of annihilation, citing Russia's invasion of Ukraine, nuclear-armed Israel's Gaza war, and worsening climate change as factors driving the risk of global catastrophe.
핵 과학자들이 이론적인 인류 멸망 시점을 나타낸 일명 멸망의 날 시계를 자정까지 90초가 남은 것으로 맞췄습니다. 이들은 전 지구적 재앙의 위험을 초래하는 요인으로 러시아의 우크라이나 침공, 핵 무장국 이스라엘의 가자지구 전쟁, 악화하는 기후변화를 꼽았습니다. Okay, so the doomsday clock.
The old doomsday clock, right. So it's not good, 90 seconds to midnight, but it wasn't changed from last year. They kept it the same. So
There's one positive then.
yeah, right. I'm trying to be optimistic. I'm trying to look at it glass half full.
half full, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it is 90 seconds to midnight is the closest it has ever been.
Oh, I see. 자, 작년과 일단 그 1년 전과 똑같다라는 점에서는 조금 뭐라 그럴까요? silver lining 아니면 optimistic 그나마 좀 희망적인 것이죠. 이 자정에 더 가까워지지는 않았으니까 1년 전과 같은 자정에서 90초 남은 시점으로 지금 핵 과학자들이 멸망의 날 시계 현 시점을 거기다 지금 두고 있다는 겁니다. 그만큼 우리가 멸망에 가깝다라는 얘기로 해석을 할 수 있기는 한데요. Tell us more, Ray.
Well, this clock, so scientists set the clock based on existential risks to Earth and people. So our existence, so nuclear threats, climate change,
Sure.
disruptive technology such as AI, new biotechnology. These are all the things that go into their assessment. So this first began in 1947. The clock was set at 7 minutes to midnight back then, and it was actually created by J. Robert Oppenheimer. Back in 1947. Albert Einstein was involved as well, and other atomic scientists. In 1953, the clock was set 2 minutes to midnight. That was when the U.S. and the Soviet Union both tested thermonuclear weapons. Surprisingly enough, during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, it was 7 minutes to midnight. So they're saying that we are facing bigger risks now than back then. The furthest it was ever set, 17 minutes to midnight. That was in 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the signing of the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty.
Oh, so it's actually gone back and forth.
Yeah, it does. It goes back and forth.
Interesting.
Yep.
1947년에 처음 만들어진 이 Doomsday Clock. 그때 오펜하이머와 또 아인슈타인도 관련이 있었다라고 하는데요. 그때 당시에는 자정으로부터 7분 전, 7 minutes to midnight. 였는데 이제 그 이후에도 보면은 조금 더 자정에 가까워졌다가 또 멀어졌다가 왔다 갔다 하는 여러 가지 역사적인 사건들이 있었죠. 현재는 자정으로부터 90초 전 상황이라고 합니다. Okay, so we're talking about time here, 90 seconds to midnight.
Right, so that means in 90 seconds, it will be midnight. But most people don't. You don't usually count in seconds when you're talking about time.
Right.
So, for example, let's say it's 7:50. People could say, if someone says, "What time is it?" I could say, "Oh, it's 10 to 8."
그래.
10 minutes to 8 o'clock. In 10 minutes, it will be 8 o'clock.
네, 시간을 말하는 여러 방법 중에 하나죠. 우리가 이제 7시 50분을 8시 10분 전이라고 하는 것과 마찬가지로 영어로는요. 7:50라고 할 수도 있지만 10 to 8, 10 minutes to 8 둘 다 가능해요. minutes 생략 가능합니다. 자, 그래서 여기서는 90 seconds to midnight니까 보통은 우리가 뭐 몇 시 되기 몇 초 전 이런 거 잘 안 하지만 그래도 여기서는 의미가 있죠. 자정이 되기 90초 전이다. What about annihilation?
Ooh, annihilation.
It's a
Not a
scary
good word.
word.
Total destruction, obliteration.
Yep.
Nothing remains after.
Oh.
And you can also use it as a verb. You can say annihilate. And sometimes people use it like if one team in sports beats the other team by a huge score, they annihilated them.
do you
We'll
use it
say
in
it that
sports
way.
as
Yeah, it
well?
was a total annihilation. They just destroyed that team.
아, 그렇군요.
Or also in elections, they'll say it. Oh, he annihilated his opponent, or that candidate faced annihilation at the polls.
아,
They were
그래요.
just destroyed.
자, annihilation이라는 것은 전멸이란 뜻이고 동사 형태는 annihilate인데 스포츠나 아니면은 선거 결과에 대해서도 압승이었다 이런 느낌으로 말할 때 영어에서 승자가 패자를 destroy 했다, annihilate 했다 이렇게 말할 수가 있네요. 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. Atomic scientists have set their doomsday clock at 90 seconds to midnight, or the theoretical point of annihilation, citing Russia's invasion of Ukraine, nuclear-armed Israel's Gaza war, and worsening climate change as factors driving the risk of global catastrophe. Here's our next headline.
A study has revealed that consuming energy drinks, even occasionally, raises the risk of disturbed sleep.
에너지 음료를 가끔씩만 마셔도 수면 장애 위험이 커진다는 연구 결과가 나왔습니다. All right, so no energy drinks then, I suppose. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, I'd stay away from energy drinks,
me
but I'm
too.
such a coffee fiend. That's my problem.
But energy drinks have way more caffeine than coffee.
Plus sugar,
Yeah.
a lot of sugar, and other things. So this study involved more than 53,000 people aged between 18 and 35 in Norway. So this
a big study.
Yeah, this did shed some light. So researchers found that people who consumed them every day, they slept about half an hour less than people who occasionally or not at all who drink them occasionally or not at all.
Okay.
And they found that even just an occasional can of an occasional energy drink, even like 1 to 3 per month, not very many, per month, not
Right.
per week, per month, is even linked to the heightened risk of disturbed sleep, they found.
한 달에 한 번에서 3번 정도만 마셔도 그러면 이제 수면의 질이 많이 떨어지더라 이런 얘기네요.
Now, they did stress that this was an observational study, so they say that firm conclusions can't really be drawn from this.
Sure.
So the researchers acknowledge something called reverse causality. So the energy drink consumption could be a consequence of poor sleep rather than the other way around. So
I see.
people who don't sleep well, they don't sleep enough, they wake up, they're tired, they have an energy drink. So
Is it the chicken or the egg?
yeah, right, exactly.
그래요. And that's always the case with studies. You have to be very careful with what sort of conclusion you come up with.
Right.
5만 3천 명이 참여한 노르웨이의 연구에 따르면은요, 에너지 드링크를 많이 마신 사람 당연히 이제 수면의 질도 떨어지고 수면의 양도 떨어졌었는데 이렇게 한 달에 몇 번만 마셔도 수면의 질이 떨어졌다라고 합니다. 다만 여기서 우리가 주의해야 되는 점은 에너지 음료 때문에 수면의 질이 떨어진 것인지 수면의 질이 원래 안 좋았던 분들이 에너지 음료를 마시는 것인지 이 부분은 조금 더 연구가 필요할 것이다. 둘 다 가능성이 있다. 이렇게 지금 얘기를 해주셨습니다. 이걸 reverse causality라고 하네요. 자, 표현 보겠습니다. Occasionally.
Occasionally means sometimes, from time to time, now and then. You can also change it and say on occasion.
Oh yeah.
Right? So my example sentence is, I occasionally enjoy a glass of wine with dinner. Very rarely. I'm not a wine drinker.
Yeah.
But I could change that sentence and I can say, or if you ask me, oh, do you ever drink wine with dinner? I could say on occasion or occasionally.
Yeah.
Those two phrases can be used interchangeably.
가끔, on occasion, or occasionally. And what about disturbed sleep?
Disturbed in general means interrupted. If you disturb somebody if you interrupt them. So if
그렇죠.
your sleep is often interrupted, you wake up in the middle of the night, you wake up too early, that's disturb.
Yeah.
And like my phone, I put a do not disturb setting on my phone. You can even see it at the bottom there. When the show starts, so I don't get any phone calls or messages. That's a
didn't know
setting
there was
on
a
your phone.
do not disturb setting.
Yeah, and do not disturb is kind of a phrase in English.
Yeah.
If you go to a hotel, they'll give those little cards you can put on your door handle outside saying do not disturb, so they don't knock on your door in the morning to clean.
네, 방해하지 마세요라는 뜻이 있는데요. Do not disturb. 근데 그렇게 방해받은 잠은 수면의 질이 떨어진 그런 잠이라고 볼 수 있겠습니다. 다시 한번 읽어볼게요. A study has revealed that consuming energy drinks, even occasionally, raises the risk of disturbed sleep. Now here's our final headline.
The South African government has said it will challenge the auctioning of dozens of personal items belonging to the late former President Nelson Mandela, saying the artifacts are of historical significance and should be preserved within the country.
넬슨 만델라 전 남아프리카 공화국 대통령의 개인 소장품 수십 점이 경매에 나온 데에 대해 남아공 정부가 역사적으로 중요한 유물들이 남아공 내에서 보존되어야 한다며 이의를 제기했습니다. Alright, what's going on?
Well, about 75 items are set to go under the hammer, which means go
Up for
to
auction.
up for auction, right? Just a
Yes.
phrase, right?
Yeah.
Under the hammer means up for auction on February 22nd, and this is going to be done in New York. However, South Africa's Ministry of Culture has said it filed an appeal to halt what they called the unpermitted export of these objects.
그래요. And Mandela's family is actually hoping to do this.
Yeah, apparently his daughter is one of the driving forces behind this. She's kind of
Yes.
driving this. So some of the items include his iconic Ray-Ban sunglasses, his Madiba shirts.
That was his nickname.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Personal letters he wrote from prison, as well as a blanket that was gifted to him by former President Barack Obama and his wife.
Okay. 그래요.
Also a champagne cooler that was a present from Bill Clinton.
Oh,
And they've
interesting.
the bidding for that starts at $24,000.
네. 그러니까 이제 만델라의 유족, 특히 이제 그 딸인 마카지와 만델라가 그 주축이 돼가지고요. 뉴욕에서 이렇게 2월 22일 날 옥션을 하려고 추진을 하고 있는데 남아공 정부에서 안 된다. Don't take it out of the country. 이렇게 얘기를 하는 거죠. 자, 첫 번째 표현 보겠습니다. These things are called artifacts.
Right, artifacts. Artifacts just means objects from the past, but something kind of significant. Like I went to the National Museum a few months ago in Korea, like the big one here, and there's some amazing artifacts. Those old vases from like the Joseon dynasty. Those were just beautiful. And funny enough, I was in a pub in England, and they had pictures of those on the wall. We talked about those a few months ago. The white and blue ones.
Yeah.
And when I saw them on the wall in this pub, just they were paintings or photographs. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow, no one would know that, but I knew those are from Korea.
그렇습니다. 아티팩트가 이렇게 유물이라는 뜻이 있어요. 자, 그다음에 historical significance.
That means that it's something important from the past. It happened in the past, but it's things that we want to preserve because they're important. They show something relevant, something historical.
네, be of historical significance. 역사적으로 중요하다라는 뜻이 있습니다. 다시 한번 읽어볼게요. The South African government has said it will challenge the auctioning of dozens of personal items belonging to the late former president Nelson Mandela, saying the artifacts are of historical significance and should be preserved within the country. That's it for the headlines.